guys, here's Adam and I talking deeper about anger. If you guys haven't seen kind of the beginning portion of our video, make sure you jump over to that video and kind of get a feel for what we're gonna dive deeper into. This is considered a footnotes video. If you guys are curious, we've done these before. We will likely continue to keep doing them, but we just wanted to continue the conversation about anger. Again, we both think it's so important, and I know that I can say that I have a lot of conversations with my clients about what anger is, kind of doing some education around, it's not good or bad, it just is. But then I think it's so important to dive deeper into, you had kind of talked about reflexive versus cultivated. Thank you. I could not remember that. And so I just want to hear from you. Will you jump in kind of deeper into reflexive versus cultivated and kind of, either how you've seen that in your own life or in the world, in your clients, like paint a picture for everybody of kind of what those two things really are.
Yeah, so as we mentioned in the previous video, reflexive anger, it just sort of happens. Something occurs and you find yourself feeling angry about it. Now at this point, there's nothing good or bad about it. It's just there. And we have to sort of make a choice of what we're going to do with that. Because anytime that we feel anger, which is neutral, it's the middle of this sort of 3-link chain, and both the other links could be good or bad or neutral.
Okay.
So before that, we have this link of what caused the anger. And so that could be anything from, say I got a really bad haircut, which has happened, and I was angry. And so I have to ask myself, is the cause of that because, maybe I had an important interview coming up and it was actually legitimately important for me to look really good?
Yeah.
Or was it more of what I might consider a negative belief that caused that anger of, well, I just care too much about how I look. Maybe I'm vain, maybe I'm prideful. And so there's that piece. And then moving on to the piece that comes after the feeling, what are you going to do with it? So, if in the haircut example, right, I could, in a very negative example, I could just fly off the handle at the person who cut my hair and, screaming and calling names, right?
We've seen that before, right?
Yeah, unfortunately we have. That's, I think we would all agree, not a great idea.
Yeah.
Or I could take that anger and say, okay, I'm going to use this as a platform for more exploration of why I had that anger in the first place, to sort of take that energy and move me forward in either self-understanding or maybe even just wanting to grow and change the way that I do respond to anger.
Sure. Well, and in that, I kind of want to run with this situation. So in the original video, you talked about anger being a secondary emotion. So for this situation, what other feelings were you having underneath your anger that were sort of fueling or coming up as anger?
Yeah, I think in that situation, a lot of it was probably embarrassment. Probably, might even bring up some shame.
Sure.
Because, a lot of us as kids were made fun of for looks, right?
Totally.
And I'm no exception to that. And so, maybe it's bringing up some unresolved stuff from earlier in life that makes us think like, wow, that's I feel unacceptable now. And it's easier for me to get angry at somebody for quote unquote making me feel that way than it is for me to own that and say, okay, I recognize this in me. What am I going to do about it now?
Totally. I think that's so good. I love the 3-chain link piece to it, because so often we talk about our feeling and then what we do about it. But I think to actually go a step further and recognize, okay, where did that feeling come from? Why did I feel that way? And utilize that to inform what's going on inside of you, to then identify your feeling and then choose what you're going to do about it. I think that's a really important step-by-step process that happens whether we're aware of it or not, And so the more aware we can be about our emotions, I think the more healthy and integrated and wholehearted we can become as humans,
Absolutely. And I think there's a piece there where there's this sort of paradox, right? Where the more you accept yourself the way you are, the more you can actually change. Seems backward, but it is how it works. You're nodding. You've seen this working too.
Yep.
And so a lot of us feel really afraid or averse to the idea of accepting the fact of our anger, because it feels like, well, then we're going to cultivate it. It's going to turn into hatred, right? But it turns out, fun fact, if you just spend all your energy sort of denying that piece of yourself and trying to go, I'm not an angry person, well, it's not there. That's a lot of energy we can't be using for growth and making a life that's more congruent with our value system.
Absolutely. Yep, I think that's such a great point. That was something that I really struggled with as I was starting to learn about anger. Is I felt like if I spent time looking at it or naming it or paying attention to it, that it would just grow and get bigger and bigger. And exactly what you're saying is, actually, if I do that, you can move on from it quicker, and you still do have all this energy to put towards growth or healing or whatever you want to put your energy towards, honestly, but you're right. When we push it away, when we don't want to acknowledge it, we actually it does grow bigger and bigger and bigger,
Yeah, and I think, I suspect this will probably be something that comes out throughout the whole emotion series that we're doing, is that emotions have sort of a voice and they need to be heard. They need a chance to sort of speak their piece. And if we deny them that opportunity, then they're going to end up running the show. But if we just let them say what they need to say, then we're the one in control.
Totally. I had a conversation one time with a client, and I likened her emotions to like a 2-year-old. And I was like, okay, so when your kid, is trying to get your attention and you ignore your kid, what does your kid do? She's like, oh, well, she like screams louder. And I was like, yeah. And then what if you keep ignoring her? Well, soon she has like a meltdown. I'm like, yeah.
There you go.
And I did like exactly what you're saying. I think if we let our emotions be heard, they're usually fine. If you listen to your kid when your kid's asking you a question or needs your attention and you give it to them, they're usually fine and they go on their way,
Yeah, and so there's a really big self-compassion piece in there too, of saying, there's a part of me that feels like this angry 2-year-old, right? Or this angry or violent or destructive or whatever sort of labels we might be afraid of, frankly. But what does that part of us need? That part needs some compassion to just bring them alongside and say, hey, it's okay.
Totally.
I want to listen to what you have to say right now because it's important.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's so valuable. And just another layer deeper of how we can acknowledge and embrace our emotions. What would you say about the other part of anger that we haven't really touched on yet?
The cultivated portion.
Jumping in deeper with that cultivated piece, because we've talked about, paying attention to your anger doesn't actually cultivate it. And so can you speak a little bit more to that side of things?
Yeah, and I guess there's sort of two sides to that, where one is trying to prevent cultivating our anger, and one is, what do we do when we notice it's already there?
Sure.
And I think most of us probably start out in just realizing one day, oh my gosh, I'm just a really angry person about this. I have a lot of bitterness in me, and it's poisoning me. And so I think, the first step is just noticing that it's there, sort of grieving that is a part of our lives, grieving the things that have led to that. But then starting to do the really difficult but valuable work of moving toward a place of forgiveness, which is obviously a way bigger topic than we have time for now.
Sure.
But forgiveness is arguably it's as much for you or more for you than for the person you're forgiving.
Absolutely.
And so that's there's a researcher named Everett Worthington who's done a lot of wonderful work on forgiveness and how it just produces health, and what it does and doesn't mean. But that's definitely a thing to do when you start recognizing that, is take those steps to grieve and work toward forgiveness. And I think on that preventative piece too, when we notice ourselves just sort of cycling this thought through our heads of, oh, I'm still so angry that person did that to me. Which, we all do sometimes,
Absolutely.
right? To notice that and not condemn yourself for being like, oh, you're a terrible angry person. You're still thinking about this. But just saying, okay, I'm noticing that I'm still really stuck on this. What are those sort of primary emotions under it? What am I really sad about that I need to grieve? How do I feel afraid in ways I need to comfort myself or be comforted? And to just try and cut that off before it becomes this sort of bitterness that hurts us.
Yep. I think that's really key, because sometimes we can think that we've processed through, how somebody hurt us, and then it kind of pops up later, and it can be really easy to be critical of ourselves because man, I thought I already dealt with that. I thought I was fine. I thought I forgave them. I thought I was good and I'd moved on, And so I think what you're saying is so important, is to recognize what's going on inside of us. How can we acknowledge the feeling that's there? What triggered it? What brought it up? Is there a need we have going on in our life that is not being met? Do we need to circle back and have a conversation? Like sometimes I think it's really easy to be critical and be like, well, that happened like 2 years ago. There's no way I'm allowed to bring that up again. Or, but ultimately maybe you do need to bring it up, and that's a whole other conversation. But I think we can use our emotions to recognize and learn more about ourselves. And I think that's just a really, really powerful and empowering thing that we get to do with ourselves. And then the more that we learn about our emotions, I think it opens us up to offer that to other people. You can start to recognize, oh, you seem really angry right now. What do you need? How can I help you? Do we need to have a conversation? Can we talk about it later? I think the more work we do inside of ourselves, the more opportunity we can learn to do that with our community, our family, our friends, coworkers, things like that. So
yeah, 100%. Because the more we sort of learn to accept and be compassionate toward that angry part of ourselves, the less afraid we are of our own anger, and that means the less afraid we are of other people's anger. And so we can become this sort of agent for healing in the lives of the people around us because we've done that work in ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Thanks for joining us for this extended conversation on anger. I feel like even I learned some things, and I know that I have a lot to think about when it comes to anger and emotions, and I really hope the same for y'all, that you were able to learn a little bit more and have some things to think about throughout your week. So looking forward to see you next week.